Hi, I'm Ted Kofi, and this is a quick video entitled, Why is Africa Always a Taker? Truth is that the direction of travel when it comes to Africa and the rest of the world is always inward to Africa. Africa is always at the receiving end of everything. The new vaccines that are being developed have all been developed outside of Africa. The direction of travel is going to be inward to Africa. And Africa is absolutely the last in the queue to get these medicines, whether they want them or not. Because the Brits, the Canadians, the Indians have got their the Russians have got theirs, the Chinese have got theirs. Africa is at the back of the queue, waiting for the direction of travel to be fulfilled as inwards. Finance. Africa's got all the natural resources that the rest of the world needs to run the way it's been running till now. But it doesn't have the finance and often doesn't have the technology to develop those natural resources. So, again, the direction of travel for finance is inwards. In fact, African governments don't balance their books without looking at those three letters, FDI, foreign direct investment. Inwards. Technology. Even though the world could possibly have been leveled enormously by the advent of digital science and digital technologies, something which kids these days, young people, are born using. All those breakthroughs appear to be coming from outside and coming into Africa. Why doesn't Africa have its own equivalent of Facebook the Chinese have? Why doesn't Africa have its equivalent of Twitter? America has, and it's well in bed with the rest of the world. What about messaging apps? How well are these working? Now, I've heard about a few out there, but their story is indistinct. And that goes to something I'm going to mention a little bit later. Research, innovation and new ideas. My native country, Ghana, is awash with PhDs. Awash with PhDs. Go and look at the government right now, and there are 2 a penny in there. These are highly, highly elite educated people. The point about being a PhD is that you have added to the sum total of human knowledge in a particular niche area. You have deep dived into that area and are an expert in that area. It implies creativity and application of oneself to new problems. What's the output from the PhDs that come from Africa? And so the direction of travel, again, for ideas is inward to Africa. Now, let's come to the main crux of what I want to talk about, the media, African media. And let's go with the topic du jour, COVID and the pandemic. I wonder to myself, how many African media carry the experience of people in the diaspora, people like me, right here in London, and our perception, understanding, and experience of the European way of managing COVID. What about the differential impacts this pandemic has had on PAO, people of African origin? What is African media doing about it? There is an international narrative being carried very strongly. It's actually backed by media censorship, which is increasingly being more tightly controlled, such that the official narrative gets through. African media doesn't have to be a victim of that. Where is its original coverage? What I notice, rather, is that African media relies on the Press Association, Reuters, and other news agencies which are created for a certain place, controlled by various interests, none of which have Africa as a priority. And so naturally, the content of African media apes the narrative that the West throws out about our events, our experiences in the world. Investigative reports. Where are these? I've often wondered to myself that whenever I see the reports, say, of a world-class media organization, which definitely the BBC is, CNN, likewise, Al Jazeera, ABC, NBC, other news channels, they actually investigate, break stories, and share news from a particular perspective. Now, we all benefit from seeing news in the round. And it comes back down to that old thing about the elephant. What does it look like? Somebody said it looked like a rope because they got a hold of its trunk. Somebody said it felt like a wall because they got a hold of its side. Somebody said it felt like a tree trunk because they were feeling its leg. The thing is, there are multiple perspectives, multiple prisms through which world affairs can be stated. If African media doesn't investigate its own material and publish its own material, it will always be left behind. Now, I want to give another example of how the West shapes the news agenda and the optics about Africa. In a Swiss newspaper, Diese große Mutter is what the Swiss newspaper calls the new head of the WTA. Diese große Mutter. Excuse my dodgy German. Große Mutter is German for grandma. What they fail to mention is that the lady who is now the head, the seventh head of the WTO, and the first woman to lead the WTO, that's the World Trade Organization, and the first African to lead the WTO. Her name is Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala. It's a double-barreled name at the end. And there's a message in that double-barreled name. When Africans maintained their maiden names and attached their married names to it, it means that this lady's coming from somewhere. They called her a grandmother. Ngozi has a degree in economics from Harvard University. I think it'll do. Harvard is something of a classy organization, a classy academic background. But then, here's the thing. Her PhD is from MIT, that's a Massachusetts Institute of Technology, another world-class organization. She is on the boards of Twitter, used to be a deputy managing director of the World Bank. She's on the board of Gavi, that's Bill and Melinda Gates' outfit, another very powerful world organization. And the reason she's got a double-barreled name is that her dad is a king, making her a princess. Her dad is the Obi of the part of Nigeria that she originates from. So this is a little bit like completely belittling this woman, which is what perhaps Swiss women see African women who are over 60 years old for, or who see any women who are 60 years old. But I guarantee you this, if this had been a white man, they'd have been talking about her Harvard credentials, her MIT credentials. They would also have been talking about the boards she'd served on and the classy organizations, the prestigious organizations, powerful organizations on which she's been a high-serving executive. But they didn't. And they can do this because Africans don't tell their own story. African media don't tell their own story. I'll contrast this with another bee I have in my bonnet about the stories of, say, the less salubrious parts of London. I love London. It's a fantastic cosmopolitan city. We got everything here, from extreme wealth to extreme deprivation. It's a reality. But the people in Africa likely think that the streets of London are paved with gold. Why? Because their investigative journalists don't go to the places in London that are deficient. All they do is they pick up the PR spin from the BBC, ITN, Channel 4, CNN, and so on, who have no percentage in talking about the, shall we say, moody parts of London, and paint this place as a centre of human civilization. What do you think Africans would start to think if they realised that right here in London, right here in the United Kingdom, a young striker from Manchester United, everybody knows about Manchester United, called Marcus Rashford, has had to hold literally a gun to the head of the government to provide school food for young children who can't afford to eat 3 square meals during this pandemic because of the lockdown and because of the poverty of their parents. I wonder how often that kind of story plays in an African media for African people to get another perspective on what the United Kingdom, anywhere in Europe in fact, looks like. We don't do that kind of journalism. So again, the direction of travel for news, information and points of view is inwards into Africa. Now, finally, we got the vaccination. This vax has been created by Pfizer, Moderna, AstraZeneca here abroad. Pfizer's German and American. Moderna is also made in America, and AstraZeneca is the UK's contribution to the whole vaccine edifice. Now, Africans are waiting, no doubt, for this vaccine to be brought to them. Today I heard that the Cubans had started long-term trials on their vaccine. They're not waiting for anybody to come and bring them anything. And so, to cut a long story short, the point I really want to make is that we have to change the direction of travel. We have to start changing the narratives that come out, because otherwise Africans become hostages to the narratives, the thought ideas, the stratagems, and so on, which are dreamt up by other people, first and foremost in their own interest. So I'm going to publish this to YouTube. Hit the subscribe button down below. Comment. Do share it widely if you can, because the more you share, actually, the more visible my material is going to become. And I hope it's constructive, because I'm in this to make the 21st century, despite the pandemic, despite all odds, to make the 21st century, in part, the century of Africa, when Africa wakes up. Thanks so much.